Hello everyone, Blade here, and welcome to my Joker build guide, where I'll go over his dupes, skill priorities, best weapons, gear sets, theme comps, and more to help you utilize his abilities if you decide to pull for him. Let's go ahead and get started. So finally, with the release of Global, Joker, our 5-star trickster, is actually inside of P5X, ready to be pulled whenever you want to really go for. Now this character, of course, you guys have at least probably a month to go ahead and go for, and without a doubt, he's still one of the best characters to go ahead and go for at the beginning of the game. He really can fit into a ton of different teams here, and in the long run, he's pretty darn good as well. He's fairly strong and has a little bit of flexibility with him when it does come down to some of his moves. Whether either it's just the AOE capabilities or one of his single target moves, he still packs a little bit of a punch that can help him out in the long run with a decent mechanic that allows him to go a second time. These are all things that are pretty darn interesting when it does at least go into his character arc, so I feel like a lot of you guys are interested in this as well. But for us to actually go more into this and at least the options that he has at his capabilities, we need to go ahead and look at least the kit explanation. Let's go ahead and check that out. Alright, so getting down into at least the kit explanation, the one thing I can say about Joker is this trickster quite literally has a lot of cards up his sleeve. Now this man, I have to say, I didn't expect him to live as long, especially in the meta, regarding at least the inside of things, and he has lived ever since the beginning of the game up till now. This character is pretty much the only cursed AOE DPS that's out there. Not even pretty much, is the only DPS out here that is a cursed AOE DPS there. And it's kind of interesting because with this in mind, he is also one of the few people who actually have a different mechanic called the extra turn mechanic. Now, just as the name implies here, after a certain amount of stacks, he's able to trigger this said extra turn. In doing so, he actually gets an increase of damage dealt. Now, this is only a part of at least his kit here, which kind of bleeds more into the passive side, so we're going to go ahead and explain some of that as well before we get into everything else. So at least regarding his passives here, he has two of them. The first one being Revenge, in which this one increases his attack by 18%, and this is going to be based off per stack of Fury. Now Fury is something that he's able to build up, which is going to be for at least every foe who is below 60% HP, and it can go up to 5 whole stacks, meaning 18% attack times 5, you can get yourself pretty darn strong depending on how many Fury stacks you get. This is going to be very helpful, seeing that Joker, to be honest, is going to need this damage. With the Fury stacks that he's able to at least provide, it gives him that very strong AOE DPS that you're looking for, even within the beginning and in game later on. Pretty nice to have, so surely do make sure you're trying to get these stacks as good as possible. But the one little trick that comes along with this passive here is with building these said Fury stacks, you're not only getting stronger, but you're coming closer to his extra turn at least phase here, which is going to bleed more into the passive 2. Now the passive 2, which is called Devour, increases damage dealt by 72% during his said extra turn. Now with the reason why I said they both bleed into each other here is because by getting these Fury stacks, you are then able to eventually go into your extra turn mechanic. You will need at least 3 Fury stacks, or at least 3 or more Fury stacks here in order to trigger this extra turn. So of course, based on the amount of Fury stacks that you have, the stronger you'll end up being, and the extra turn you'll deal even more damage. He kind of goes hand in hand, especially with his kit at the end of the day, and seeing that he really does need to deal as much damage as possible, this is going to be very helpful. Now, one of the few things that you guys want to at least take into account with his kit here before we go ahead and move to the next section is that he's able to build not only these Fury stacks on his skill 1 and his skill 3, well, mainly his skill 1, but the skill 3 seeing if you deal enough damage. But alongside of this here, he's able to then stack Curse. Now Curse is going to come into play a little bit more when you decide to use the skill 3, and that's mainly because depending on if you're in the extra turn, you're not only getting that extra damage dealt from utilizing the skill 3, but if you do have extra debuffs on the enemy, which that's where the curse kind of comes into play, or any other debuffs in general comes into play, you're actually able to deal a little bit more damage, especially when it comes down to the damage dealt with just the skill 3 alone. It's kind of wild to see that he had this kit at least very early in, and it has been buffed upon as well. But I have to say, it's really good to at least see this character dealing as much as he can deal with the early amount of his kit. Pretty dang nice to see, but what's even better is of course his awarenesses. So we're going to go ahead and check that out first. As per usual, I don't really at least advise dupes for most of these characters because at the end of the day, I don't really want to promote you guys for some bad spending. Though I will say there are some dupes that some of you guys might actually find very interesting. So let's go ahead and talk about them. Starting off with the A0, which is called Showtime. At the end of Joker's turn, he's able to get, of course, 1 stack of Fury. Now this does apply to any foe that is at least below 60% HP, which can go to a max of 5 stacks. Do this, it goes hand in hand with at least the extra turn mechanic. If you do have 3 or more Fury stacks, you're able to then go into extra turn mechanic, which after you end it, does remove 3 of those said stacks. So even though you had 5, you will now end up being at 2. During this whole phase, of course, you can deal a little bit of extra damage, but when it comes down to buffs and debuffs, it does not count down. So any of those, if you take multiple turns, won't be counted against you. So surely do keep that in mind. Now, one of the last things at least about this awareness here is only every enemy can give you only 1 Fury stack. So I'm trying to make the best that you can do. Now going into at least the A1 here, skills now deal at least 30% more damage to the main target, while then 10% more damage to non-main targets. So it's an overall just a damage boost. Pretty decent. But the big one that a lot of people I feel like are gonna go for is gonna go down to the A3. This one's called Unpredictability here, which during the extra turn, you decrease your SP cost by 80%. Now this may not be a huge deal for some people, but it actually goes a little bit further into it. This increases your attack by 50% as long as your SP is not less than 60%. So that's where that SP decrease cost actually comes in handy, because as long as your SP isn't at least below 60%, you're immediately dealing out a ton more damage, seeing it is a 50% increase. Now, of course, when we look at the last awareness, this one's called Grand Finale, and this one here immediately executes a foe whenever they are less than 25 HP. This goes up to 250% attack, and you can only trigger this once. So every turn, you can very well try to trigger it, though it's only gonna happen once per enemy, so surely do keep that in mind. An additional thing about the A6 here is whenever you use a skill during the extra turn, you will deal 50% attack as curse damage to all foes. So it's really nice to at least have it back in your pocket. Now that we at least went over at least all of these awarenesses, let's go ahead and talk about the next section, being the skill priority. All right, so checking the skill priority section here, I'd like you guys to go ahead and pay attention to the infographic above. This is one of the few things that I have to say is pretty simple, and I think a lot of people are gonna know, but you wanna make sure you're using the skill 3 first, then the skill 1, going into the combat skills, which is your highlight, and then the skill 2. Reasoning for this is because your skill 3 is your most important skill, doing the most damage. Skill 1 can kind of set you up a little bit as well with the debuff it does apply, and then the combat skills is giving you more of course your stacks for at least your phase when you do need to, while also doing some nice highlight damage. Skill 2 is kind of the last of your priority list here, mainly just because we don't really utilize this single target skill too often, so there's not really a need to get it up immediately. So surely do keep that in mind. But now we went over at least the whole skill priority section, you definitely want to go ahead and move on to the weapon options section as well. So immediately checking out the weapon options, I do have to say one thing, that this weapon is definitely not needed when it comes down to the 5-star weapon. Though if you're anything like me, you're going to end up re-rolling and trying to get in the best for at least your first DPS, you might want the 5-star weapon at least at your disposal. But for my people who are trying to go on the budget here, the 4-star weapon is more than enough for you. This was called the machete here, in which increases your attack by 12%, up to a whopping amount of 24% if you have it fully duped, in which whenever you do attack an enemy with a debuff, which normally will happen, your attack is actually increased by an additional 19.1%, up to a whopping 36.2%. In addition here, this is pretty darn nice to see because you're actually getting yourself nearly 60% attack increase, which is always nice to have, but compared to the 5-star weapon here, you are missing out on a couple of additionals, which is the only downside, though it's nothing too huge. So if you're anything like me and you really want to set up that 5-star, I think you really want to have the 5-star weapon. Now the 5-star weapon here is actually called Phoenix. You're not only getting, of course, this attack increase, which is a 30% increase, and then a little bit extra, of course, if you're going for the dupes there. But if you also get this 5-star weapon, you're also getting an increase inside of the curse damage category. This is going to be a whopping 10% if you're crazy enough to go for the dupes here, a 19% as well. But each time you gain 1 Fury, up to a maximum of 3 times, you're actually able to then have this for 2 whole turns and stack that effect. So instead of it being just a 10% curse damage increase, it actually can be a 30% curse damage increase as long as you stacked it good enough. This will last for 2 whole turns, so you're getting some nice curse damage and attack out of it as well. But it comes with one more addition. Now this also is not, of course, an addition on the 4-star, it's only for the 5-star here, in which increases your damage dealt of the next attack by 23.0%. so really just 23% in general. But this only is in effect whenever you have 3 Fury stacks, so if you really want the most out of this whole weapon here, you do need 3 Fury stacks just to trigger the 30% curse damage, and then 3 Fury stacks to trigger the damage dealt needed, which is 23%. But don't let that at least doubt you too much. Getting those Fury stacks are going to be pretty darn easy here, so I feel like a lot of you guys might really want to go for this weapon. Now at the end of the day, you don't need it. It's not a must-have weapon, so if you want to go ahead and save your pools, you very well can. Though the difference in damage can of course occur to be a little bit higher, I still feel like a lot of you guys might want to go ahead and just be a little bit careful when it comes down to investing to the weapons. So I thought you guys should know about that first. But now we went over at least these 2 weapons here. Let's go ahead and check out the gear set. Going straight into at least the best gear set for Joker, the one thing I have to say is you don't have to worry about this gear set changing for a long time. In fact, it hasn't even changed in the future, being at least for the CN client so far. He kind of stays with this set fully all the way. That's because it's called the interference set. This 4 set effect is pretty darn good, and it actually has a really good 2 set effect as well, seeing that it increases his curse damage by 10%. Alongside of this here, its 4 set effect increases his skill damage to enemies with debuffs, which will always happen here, by a maximum of 20%. This is allowing him to deal as much damage that he possibly can deal here and pretty much handle anything that you really throw at the guy. Pretty nice to have this at least in the back pocket here, making him a really decent cursed AOE DPS here. But whenever it's paired with the universe card called Departure, it does give him a little bit of extra oomph when it comes down to at least battles. This extra effect that it ends up giving here is increasing his attack percent by 30%, which is going to be for a total of 3 whole turns. Now, this does refresh whenever you do defeat an enemy here, so as long as you're defeating someone, you're getting that 30% attack at all costs. So surely when you pair that with everything that we got from at least the 4 set effect with the Revelation cards, you guys can understand why this is his best set. I don't think any other set's going to be at least out for a long time, so no need to worry if it's changing at any time. Though when we're talking about the main stats, there are a few that you guys want to go ahead and pay attention to. So like your normal DPS here, I would like to say the main stats that you're looking for is immediately going to be damage bonus on your moon piece, crit rate on your star piece, and attack percent on your planet piece. As for at least the substats, that's where things get a little bit more tricky. You're going to look for at least the baseline stats being at least crit rate, crit damage, and damage bonus. All of these substats are absolutely amazing. Now they are all very aggressive type substats, so getting every last one of these in a row is going to be a little bit difficult. So try to get what you really can get, and the recommended stats that I can really give you guys, especially out of battle, is going to be at least 30% crit rate, 200% crit damage, and at least plus 10 in pin. These stats are pretty much going to be the baseline, so I mean, like, if you're at least going for more than this, or if you already have more than this, you're already set to go. You don't need any more than that as well, but it's really nice to at least know what you need to have as a minimum, so surely do keep that in mind. But now we went over at least all of this here, we're gonna go ahead and go to the next section, which is going to be the team comps for the video. Getting down to at least the last section here in the end of the video, I do have to say the best team for at least Joker is gonna be pretty simple. In fact, there's 2 teams here. There's gonna be one at least for my CN folks, and then one for the people who are on global. So the first one for at least my CN people here, there's gonna be the team which is Winvast, Turbo, and having Anj in the team as well. This is probably the best that you can possibly utilize, seeing Anj is going to help him go as many turns as possible, while Winvast and Turbo are also buffing him to Oblivion, allowing him to deal as much damage as possible. This is definitely a good team to have in the future, or at least all my global folks who are going to be watching this as well. So keep an eye on those characters if you really want to have a long Jeopardy for at least Joker. Now for some of you guys who are on the global side of things, don't worry, I didn't forget about you guys. So we're going to take a look at the down team below here. Now this team is also really good. You're usually going to be utilizing Rin, our man Leon, and then having Okeon in the team. Though if you're having issues with at least survivability wise, you can very well swap out some of these characters. One of them being at least Leon, with at least Lufel being a healer, or you can go ahead and keep Leon in and just change out the navigator themselves to Puppet. Puppet's going to be really helpful with at least shielding and things of that nature. So if you do need a little bit of that on the back end, you very well can do so. Now with the teams at least discussed here, we're going to go ahead and go over the personas before we end out the video. Now I at least recommend you guys to go ahead and use Alice. Alice is going to be very helpful when it comes down to at least amplifying your curse damage, so surely do keep that in mind. when it comes down to this. This is actually going to help you out with the damage taken to foes while also helping out your attack percentage overall. Another persona that you can go ahead and go for is going to be Dionysus. Dionysus is going to help you out with the crit rate that you do need, as well as crit damage on the main target that you're actually able to buff. So surely do keep that in mind. And then lastly is going to be Cert. Cert is a very helpful 3-star persona here, in which increases your EHR, allowing you to really get more, of course, those debuffs off, while also helping you out against any enemies that are above 50% HP. So surely do keep that in mind as well. But now we went over at least all the personas here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please do smash that like button with your forehead and consider subscribing if you are new. I'm gonna continue at least upgrading and updating all of these build guides as the time does come, whether it's going to be a couple 4 stars in the future or even newer 5-star limited and standard characters. So look out for those as well. But till then, everybody, peace out and have a wonderful day.